push that side lane out, and then
Cái này là một cái mà hồi nãy bên phía của King Secret với lại bên phía của CBS nên làm á. Có nghĩa mình phải chiếm cái lượng tầm nhìn với những cái lợi thế nhất định mà mình đang có. Chênh lệch vừa rồi là 7.000 tiền. Chênh lệch vừa rồi là 7.000 tiền. Nhưng mà anh em thấy là cái lượng tầm nhìn của họ không vượt trội hơn. Họ không tạo đủ áp lực để di chuyển và chiếm vào cái phần đất của phía đối phương. Anh em hình dung không?
When people think of Faker, his ludicrous mechanics and famous outplays come to mind.
Oh, look at the cleanse, look at the moves!
Mid play.
What was that?
What most people don't know, however, is being flashy is not the reason Faker is so incredible. We'd argue that it's the smaller, subtle details in his gameplay that are completely invisible to the average viewer that allow Faker to reach levels of success unseen elsewhere in League or even any other game throughout the years. It's the invisible moments you don't see unless you know what to look for, and you're paying very close attention to what has kept Faker at the top for over a decade of competition. Today, we're going to be revealing the skills nobody can see, which Faker is using to dominate the best players in the world. So, let's get right into it. And what better way to illustrate just how good Faker is at subtle decision making than during his laning phase versus Chovy, one of the world's most dominant lane players. But before we get into the matchup, we want you to be able to follow along easily. So first, we're going to simplify one of the more ambiguous terms that you'll often hear, priority. In League's professional play, the word priority gets thrown around a lot.
Lợi thế thường được nhắc đến rất nhiều. Nhưng mà nếu không thực sự nắm rõ lợi thế ở đây sẽ là như thế nào, lợi thế di chuyển ra hai bên cánh, hay nói chính xác hơn là trong giai đoạn vừa qua đó, cái lợi thế này á, Shop đã cụ thể hóa bằng cái việc mà cái từ mà kiểm soát tầm nhìn đó nè. Kiểm soát tầm nhìn thì nó là một trong những cái lợi thế mà đường giữa mang lại á.
To really understand it, it can be very confusing as it's used to describe a variety of things.
Chứ không phải là lợi thế là solo kill đối phương, không phải là lợi thế
là later stages of the game.
Cái đó cũng là lợi thế nhưng mà nó nhìn
it
thấy
all
cái
can be a
hướng
bit
khác.
overwhelming. So let's make things easy and simplify lane phase priority to something like taking turns, and you'll soon see why Faker is so good at this. A turn is whenever you're able to freely move from the lane, be it roam, recall, ward, etc. And the way you get that opportunity is by crashing a wave at your opponent's
Mình sẽ
call,
thấy lợi
ward,
thế ở đây là
etc.
gì? Lợi thế ở đây là cái khoảng thời gian trống để mà mình di chuyển, khoảng thời gian trống để mà mình về trước đối phương đó. Tại sao mà những người chơi đường trên bây giờ thường hay Roxy lính nếu có cơ hội á thì họ sẽ có thời gian về nhà sớm hơn đối phương di chuyển ra. Nói chung là nó được quy đổi về mặt thời gian, kiểm soát tầm nhìn luôn ha.
And the way you get that opportunity is by crashing a wave at your opponent's tower. This does one of two things. First, it keeps your opponent locked in lane since they have to sit there and farm the wave at their turret. Two, it causes a bounce back wave. Anytime you crash a wave at a tower, the next few waves will usually slowly bounce back to your side of the lane. This way, after you're done doing whatever you chose to do, you can come back to lane without having missed too much farm. It's a fairly simple concept that many of you may already know about. But what separates players like Faker from me and you is how he actually puts this concept into action. Faker specifically uses a lot of small things and techniques to get more turns than his opponents and utilizes those opportunities to their maximum potential. And to show you how, we head back into our matchup versus Chovy. What's so impressive about this game is that Faker will go from being tower dove at level 3 and falling desperately far behind to then winning this game in under 10 minutes. Here's how. After dying, Faker teleports back to lane and begins slow pushing, hoping to crash a big wave eventually. When Chovy's Victor is back in lane, Faker has to deal with the problem. To be really good at League of Legends, you want to understand not just your own goals, but what your opponent wants to do as well.
Sau cái ván này thì cái chỉ số lính của Faker nó tụt từ 10 chấm xuống còn 8.8 hay là 8.9 gì đó. Tức nghĩa là mình sẽ thấy là cái thông số của Faker á, nó sẽ bị giảm về mặt farm lính nhưng mà vẫn có cái lượng sát thương lớn ở trong những cái pha giao tranh thông số tổng đó nha.
Chovy wants to use his lead to set up a freeze. Not only would this make Kassadin susceptible to ganks, but it also denies Faker from ever getting a turn to then leave lane. If Faker can't crash the wave, well, he can't recall, which means he can't buy the items Kassadin desperately needs to lane properly. The thing is, Faker knows Chovy's intentions and immediately calls his jungler over to help. Normally, this may seem like a waste of time and a failure of a gank. Elise and Kassadin have no hope of ever killing Victor, especially with Chovy so close to his tower. But killing him was not the point. Chunking him a bit was more than enough. This way, Faker now has enough lane pressure to be able
Nó
to
đây là pha
finish
giảm
shoving
áp
the
lực cho
wave,
Faker
earning
nè.
himself a
Kiểu như
free
là
turn
cú
to
lên
do as
đó.
he wishes. His initial goal was to set up a recall timing so he could recover in his lane, but instead he notices the fight that was happening in bot lane and uses this turn to rotate there instead. He manages to help his team kill Sejuani and then heads back to mid. And as we mentioned earlier, when he gets back, there's a wave bouncing back to him. So he managed to impact the map while losing very little farm in the process. That being said, while he was gone, Chovy managed to crash the wave, so now it's his turn. Let's see what he does with his timing compared to Faker. He moves over to help his team secure the first dragon. Not bad, right? Wrong. To many of us, that may seem like a natural move, but Chovy just made a game-losing mistake without even realizing it. You see, technically, he didn't even need to help his team. T1 was in no position to contest the Drake anyway,
Về
so
sớm để
Chovy
tiếp
was
tục
better
giữ
off
nhịp ở
basing
đường giữa
for
đúng
lost
không?
chapter
Biết
or
ngay
some
mà.
other item with his turn to leave lane. While this may seem like a minuscule mistake at worst, to Faker, this is an opportunity that will seal Genji's fate in this game.
Là
While
sau đó
Chovy was
Faker
off
sẽ
a
đẩy
dragon,
tiếp một
Faker
quay.
gets to push in the wave.
Sau đó Faker sẽ đẩy tiếp một quay, cái vòng rừng từ trên xuống dưới, cặp boss di chuyển ra, áp lực của hai xạ thủ, như vậy mình sẽ có thêm tiếp tục một cái cơ hội để cho mình đi ra minh. Nhiều khả năng là sẽ tận dụng thêm pha đai trụ
Earning
đường dưới
himself
này.
another free turn. This time, he actually uses the opportunity to base and get some power for himself. Then he comes back to lane. Notice what he immediately does. His bot lane is building a slow push to potentially set up a tower dive. So Faker just R's into the wave in front of Chovy's face and tanks a bunch of damage just so he can push. Victor, without having recalled for item,
Tính ra là cái khái niệm của anh trai này đang đưa á, là cái game này nó đang trở thành một cái game theo lượt. Tôi nhớ là cái game theo lượt này thì hình như là có một tuyển thủ chia sẻ ở đường giữa, không biết phải ai ta, tôi nhớ không nhầm thì không phải đường giữa mà là Biro chia sẻ là cái game theo lượt sẽ là như thế này. Mod gì ở đây anh em? Mod gì? Biro. Rồi xong rồi ở Việt Nam mình cái đợt mà ở ngoài thì tôi nói chuyện với anh thanh niên Raje cũng nhìn nhận cái game này là game theo lượt, theo cái hướng giống như là như thế này. Biro nữa, Biro chia sẻ sau cái kỳ chung kết thế giới anh em năm 2022 á.
items can't stop him from doing this. Faker just got another free turn to move and impact the map.
Mỗi bên sẽ có một
Faker
cái lượt
syncs up
đó.
with his team and they coordinate a
Và
dive
cái lượt
to
đó đến
triple
sớm hay
kill
muộn
Genji's
hoặc
bot
là
lane
như
in
thế nào á
jungle.
thì thuộc
And
vào
that's
bạn.
that. The
Nó
game
giống như là giai đoạn ngày xưa á, tại sao mà Linh có chia sẻ với mọi người á, nếu như mà một team á, ví dụ bên phía của Gam đi, họ đai trụ ở cánh trên đi, thì 30 giây sau sẽ là cái cơ hội để cho đối phương đai trụ ngược trở lại ở cánh dưới. Quan trọng là họ có nhìn ra được cái tình huống đai trụ đó hay không mà thôi.
This point is effectively over and Faker managed to
Tại khi
secure the
mà
win
Gam
even
đai
as
trụ
a
đường
level 7
trên với
Cassidy,
mid di
a
chuyển
champion
lên
that's
thì
supposed to
mình
be
đẩy thêm cái
weak
quay
at this point in the game.
30
This
giây
is
sau
what
mình
being
chạy
a
thẳng
great
xuống
player
dưới.
is about. Understanding
Nhưng
taking
quan trọng
turns
là
is
cặp boss
easy.
của họ có
Everyone
tạo ra
can
cái
see the
thế
results
đó
of the
để đai
round,
trụ
but
hay không.
few people actually pay attention to those subtle moments that led up to those map plays. But when you watch these players in action, try to pay attention to how they got their turns in the first place, and then watch the differences in what they actually do with their opportunities. Pay close attention to Faker's crashes when you watch him play, and you will be amazed at what you can learn and the types of decisions you can pull off to win even in your own games. And that brings us to this guide's special skill cap tip. There was a little extra nugget of information we can learn from Faker here, which you can use in almost every single one of your solo queue games. Mid laners have an important timing window right around 6 minutes into the game. This is generally the time when you get to level 6 as important timing.
Phút thứ 6 như thế này thật ra nó không phải nha anh em ha. Tại vì á, nếu mà chuẩn nhất cái lượng kinh nghiệm của người chơi đường giữa là 5 phút 15 giây ở trong cái meta này. 5 phút 15 giây. Anh em lưu ý, nó sẽ được chênh lệch đến từ một vài những cái lượng kinh nghiệm. Ví dụ như là mình về nhà, mình bị mất một vài những cái lượng kinh nghiệm thì nó sẽ dao động từ 5 phút 15 giây cho tới 5 phút 35 giây là mình sẽ lên được cấp độ 6 sớm hơn so với ngày xưa.
Window right around 6 minutes into the game. This is generally the time when you get to level 6 as we saw here. Getting your
Tại vì
ult
có một
is
cái
a
thay đổi á, là một cái thay đổi ở trong cái phiên bản 12.1, 12.2 gì đó, 12.4 gì đó, là cái lượng kinh nghiệm ở đường đơn á, nó tăng lên 0,2%, 0,02% mỗi con lính. 0,02%. Nên bây giờ những người chơi đường đơn nó sẽ lên cấp 6 5 phút. Ở quay lính phút thứ 5 á, là mình dọn xong cái quay phút thứ 5 á, là mình sẽ lên 6. Thì thường thời điểm đó sẽ rơi vào khoảng chừng 5
So
phút
getting a
15
turn
giây,
to freely
5 phút,
move from
20
your
giây.
lane at this time is a huge deal. But what is just as important to know is that the honey fruit plant will spawn
hồi
in
phục
both
6 phút
sides
ha.
of the river every game somewhere between 6 and 6.5 minutes. So what you can copy is what Faker did here by trading all of his health to get the push over Chovy. Now, of course, in solo queue, you can't guarantee that your roam timers will result in a kill. There's just no coordination, right? But in the best case scenario, you can use this timing to roam and kill someone in another lane. Worst case scenario, you trade your health for a free turn, it doesn't work, so you just eat the honey fruit and go back to laning as normal. There's nothing to lose and everything to gain. And finally, we can't wrap this guide up without including at least one example of Faker's intelligent mid-game macro decision making. And what better replay to analyze than when Faker was in his base, teleported to mid lane, did literally nothing, then just shamefully walked to another lane. While that looks silly, this is one of those invisible moments we mentioned that makes Faker so good, and how he wins his team so many games through simple plays that even you can copy. Let's break down that teleport step by step so you understand why it was actually really impactful and how you can use this in your own games. So looking at mid lane before Faker teleported, notice that his teammates want to push the enemy wave, but they're kind of afraid to do so. This is because LSB's composition has an Ashe and a Sejuani, two very scary pick-based champions. So Faker's teleport wasn't to make a play, it was just to give his teammates the confidence to walk up and push the wave. This is what's known as mid priority. The point is that your team pushes a wave into the enemy side of the map. This forces at least one of your opponents to have to clear the wave. While that happens, your team now has a momentary numbers advantage. You can then use this to establish vision control over one side of the map, typically where the next objective you're contesting will be. What's really nice about this play though is that it sets up an easy rotation to a side lane as you clear vision with your team in the river. So in this case, Faker made his way up to top lane while getting Baron control at the same time. Now he can push this wave out and you'll see the results of his seemingly terrible teleport. Swapping over to LSB's point of view, they've got zero idea what T1 is up to now. Not only that, but someone probably has to go clear this wave that Faker just pushed. T1 can now do anything, start the Baron, or even look for a pick, which is what they actually end up doing. They all set this up in the Fog of War to punish Sylas for clearing this wave. And from there, this leads to a free Baron, which T1 then uses to close out the game. All of this off of Faker's one teleport. Okay, so that may look like it requires some deep team coordination to pull off and will be useless in your own solo queue games, but that cannot be further from the truth. All you have to do is group up with your team to push the wave in mid and get priority. Then you have a sweeper or a control ward in your inventory and just rotate over to a side lane, clearing some wards on the way. Push that side lane out and then
Cái này là một cái mà hồi nãy bên phía của Team Secret với lại bên phía của CBS nên làm á. Có nghĩa mình phải chiếm cái lượng tầm nhìn với những cái lợi thế nhất định mà mình đang có. Chênh lệch vừa rồi là 7.000 tiền. Chênh lệch vừa rồi là 7.000 tiền. Nhưng mà anh em thấy là cái lượng tầm nhìn của họ không vượt trội hơn. Họ không tạo đủ áp lực để di chuyển và chiếm vào cái phần đất của phía đối phương. Anh em hình dung không?
And you'll see just how often Faker does this exact rotation. It's very underappreciated, but it's one of the major reasons they can close out games so effortlessly. He syncs up with his teammates around mid, then he helps them by clearing vision on his way to a side lane. There, he pushes out the wave and then regroups with his team. He does this exact play constantly. While you may not have the level of synergy he does with his teammates, you have to keep in mind that this will be balanced in your own solo queue games by the countless mistakes your opponents make by comparison. Having vision control over an objective and pushing waves is a recipe for not only success in competitive play, but also in any elo that you may be in. Just watch how much importance Faker places on the subtle rotation when you watch T1, and you will quickly realize why you should be doing it every single game you can. To wrap things up, Faker is probably one of the easiest professional players to learn from by just watching him. You may not be able to imitate his mechanics, but a lot of the decisions he makes to win games are just simple fundamentals when broken down like we did here. You just need to have a keen eye and be looking for those subtle moments where he sets a play up and not just the flashy end results. Thanks for watching.
Faker có nhiều pha xử lý hay lắm, khéo lắm.